Hello, my name is Matthew, and I read one of my favorite short stories, A Christmas Memory by Truman Capote. It's a short story that I read fairly reliably every year this time of year when it's fruitcake weather. And I just love going back to this story and spending time with these characters. It's a story of an unlikely friendship. It's a young boy and a dotty old woman, and they're cousins through strange family relations, but they're friends. And they have a series of small, meaningful, memorable adventures around Christmas time or the time leading up to Christmas time. Baking fruitcakes, collecting um, collecting the money to bake these fruitcakes, and foraging around and getting all of the ingredients, and these funny, um, small, tender moments of a true, lifelong friendship that these two characters have, along with the adorable little dog Queenie. And I've read this short story countless times, and I was struck by um, the confidence to keep the story um, small scale and to have it really just be these recollections and to not have an additional bigger um, plot line, to just have two characters baking a fruitcake, going off to get a tree, spending time making ornaments, deliberating over the gifts that they want to exchange. I was recently watching the Andy Griffith show, which I do fairly consistently anytime I want to watch a sitcom. The Andy Griffith show is my favorite show, and is always there to bring me a smile and a laugh. And I just recently watched one of my favorite episodes, one of the best episodes of the Andy Griffith show. If you're not familiar with the show, it's actually set around the same time as this short story, A Christmas Memory by Capote. Um, 1930s, 1940s, um, America, United States, set in the South. Um, and the Andy Griffith Show is the story about the sheriff of a small town of Mayberry. And the town has a whole wide cast of um, wacky characters. The sheriff has his deputy, Barney Fife, and he's a single father. He's raising his little boy, Opie, and they live with their Aunt Bee. And the show has all sorts of fantastic episodes where there will be a suspicious out of towner that comes in, or there's a bank robbery, or um, Barney Fife is up to something, or Floyd the barber or, is doing something, or there's the big choir tournament. And so these episodes that just have typical sitcom storylines. But I recently watched an episode. It's called something like the Pickle Story or the Pickle Episode, and Aunt B, it begins, is jarring up homemade pickles, and she's in the kitchen, and the neighbor comes over, and we find out that um, the county pickle contest at the state fair is coming up, and the neighbor has won um, first place blue ribbon 11 years in a row. And the 12th year is coming up, and she's bringing over one of her prized pickle jars that she's going to be um, introducing into the contest. And Aunt Bee is in the kitchen. She's making her own pickles, jarring them up. And the neighbor says, "Oh, you're going to be entering into the contest." And Aunt Bee says, "No, I've lost 10 years in a row. I've entered 10 years in a row, and I've lost 10 years in a row." And the neighbor says, "Well, 11 years in a row." And so Aunt Bee doesn't make very good pickles. The neighbor makes the great pickles. But she's making them for her family, just Andy, the little boy Opie, and Barney Fife, who is the deputy, but also um, Andy's good friend. They are best friends. Early episodes, um, they say that Andy and Barney are cousins, but it's only mentioned twice in the very first few episodes. But after that, it's dropped, and they're just very good friends. And we get this great moment where we're in the sheriff's office, the jailhouse, and Andy and Barney are humming a song. Andy's humming a song while they're doing their paperwork and just organizing the sheriff's desk, and Barney's humming along, and Andy kind of notices the two of them are just like singing a song together, and Andy's a bit uncomfortable about it, but Barney is quite pleased that they're just humming along. And anyway, Aunt Bee comes in and says, I brought you lunch, and I have a special surprise for you." And Andy is saying, "Is it going to be roast beef sandwiches? Is it apple pie? Is it some other dessert?" And Aunt Bee goes, "No, no, it's even better than that," and pulls out these pickles. And the great thing about the Andy Griffith show, at least in the earlier seasons, is that they would have an orchestral background music that would, um, in effect, offer sound effects. And so the pickle comes out, and you hear the orchestra go womp, and she hands one to Andy, and the orchestra goes womp. Hands one to Barney, and the orchestra goes womp. And then they both take a bite of the pickle. Aunt Bee is there watching them, looking for the expression on their face. They're chewing, and the orchestra is going womp womp. Barney, in a side, whispers to Andy, "Kerosene?" as a potential ingredient. And Aunt Bee leaves, and Andy and Barney are thinking, what are we going to do with these pickles? Aunt Bee has made 8 quarts of these pickles. And they come up with a plan. They're going to get good store-bought pickles, because Aunt Bee thinks everything homemade has to be better than whatever you can get in the store. But with pickles, you can get good store-bought pickles and not these really bad Aunt Bee homemade pickles. And so they hatch a plan. They're in the kitchen. Opie's there. Barney's there. Aunt Bee is over at the neighbor's house. They're switching all the pickles out. Aunt Bee's homemade bad pickles are put into like a big doctor's bag, and Barney has to dissipate them, get rid of the pickles. He hands them out to travelers that are driving by the street, and they succeed. And now they can eat these good store-bought pickles. He, at a moment, explains to Opie, "You understand, normally I don't agree with being deceptive and lying, but we're doing this for Aunt Bee's own good. She doesn't have to feel bad, and we get to eat good pickles." Everything's going according to plan. Everything's great. Everyone's happy. Aunt Bee is none the wiser. Andy and Barney are in the sheriff's office laughing about it, having a good time. Barney goes off, and the neighbor that came in at the beginning of the episode, comes into the sheriff's office with a jar of pickles. He says, "Andy, try one of the pickles." Andy is, of course, reluctant. He doesn't like homemade pickles, but he takes a bite, and it's delicious. And while he's chewing and enjoying this pickle, the neighbor is explaining how important the contest is. Meanwhile, Aunt B has been so enamored with the reaction of her pickles. She doesn't know they've been switched. She's decided to enter in the pickle contest. Andy and Barney think, well, what's the trouble with that? And the neighbor's explaining her late husband loved her pickles, and every year that she would win this prize, she would believe her husband's in heaven and being proud of her. And she has this photo album of all of her blue ribbons, and she would look at it and think of her late husband. And Andy is now in a moral dilemma. He has to deliberate over this with Barney and explain what might be funny and lighthearted to us can be very serious and important to someone else. We can't have Aunt B entering pickles into a contest that aren't hers. They have to be Aunt B's homemade pickles. And Barney goes, "Well, how are we gonna do that? She's got 8 quarts of pickles. We can't get rid of them." And he goes, "We got to eat them. By this point, by now, to the time of the contest, we need to eat 8 quarts of pickles." And Barney's going, "My heart's not in this. I can't do it." And he goes, "It's not your heart I'm interested in. It's your stomach." And they have this montage scene at breakfast, lunch and dinner, morning, noon, night. They're eating these pickles. And it gets to the point where they've now eaten all the homemade pickles, and Aunt B realizes she now doesn't have any pickles to enter into the contest. And she goes, "Well, the only way I could do it is if I make a fresh batch." Andy goes, "That's a great idea." So Aunt B goes off and has to make a whole new batch of her own real pickles for the contest. And they have the contest, and the neighbor wins, which is a great decision on the story writers, the showrunners' part. The neighbor should win. They have these judges. Judge bites into one of Aunt B's homemade pickles and goes like, "Is this kerosene? Is it turpentine?" They're wincing. And that's the whole episode. There's no extra thing. The show is just confident in this small domestic matter that it's sweet enough and funny enough, and there's enough material to flesh out to have a great 25 minutes of a show. And we're talking about a Christmas memory. I really noticed that in the short story, it really is just about a dotty old lady, a sweet old lady, a young boy preparing for Christmas. There's they have to go to a seedy proprietor's store. There's like a club. It's run by Ha Ha Jones, and he has whiskey for sale. It's a bar at nighttime, a club. There's stabbings, people get hurt. And Ha Ha Jones is this really scary, villainous, frowning figure. He has the ironic name of Ha Ha. And a little old lady and Buddy, little boy, are going to go there to get a bottle of whiskey so they can put it into their fruitcake. The goal is to make like 30 fruitcakes or something and mail them all over the country to the president and other celebrities and people that have come into town and left. Mayberry, meanwhile, is also a dry county, so it gives you an idea of how similar the locations and timelines are. But let me see if I'm on the right page. It's such a great just exchange, this kind of mean, villainous, shown to be mean, villainous character opening the door. He's selling illegal whiskey at the back of the store. He's confronted with these two funny characters, and for a moment we were all too paralyzed to tell. Presently my friend half finds her voice, a whispering voice at best. If you please, Mr. Ha Ha, we'd like a quart of your finest whiskey. His eyes tilt more. Would you believe it? Ha Ha is smiling, laughing too. Which one of you is a drinking man? It's for making fruitcakes, Mr. Ha Ha, cooking. This sobers him. He frowns. That's no good way to waste good whiskey. Nevertheless, he retreats into the shadowed cafe and seconds later appears carrying a bottle of daisy yellow unlabeled liquor. He demonstrates its sparkle in the sunlight and says $2. We pay him with nickels and dimes and pennies. Suddenly, jangling the coins in his hand like a fistful of dice, his face softens. Tell you what, he proposes, pouring the money back into our bead purse. Just send me one of those fruitcakes instead. Just sweet, happy, fun people having sweet, happy, fun interactions with the most unlikely people. It's wonderful. And it's not just a sweet, happy story. It's a sobering, sad story. Because it is a memory. It's a recollection. The little dog dies. The little boy gets sent off to military school. The funny old lady gets older and can't keep with her yearly routine. And it's a story of looking back on that, on happy memories. They're happy and sad and wistful, but they're memories to keep, and they're special. One of my favorite stories to read this time of year makes me think of my old friend Bob. He was in his 60s when I met him. I was a teenager, 17, 18, 19 years old. One of those 3 years when we met made a tremendous impact on my life. We used to hang out at a coffee shop, him and his two dogs, Pip and Scamp. And we would talk about books. Talk about everything, but we talked about books. And he talked to me as an equal. It was one of the first relationships that I remember where, as I was a young boy or teenager, growing up, becoming a young man, it was the first time I uh, had a relationship with an adult, a proper older person who uh, treated me um, as an adult, as a friend. It wasn't a um, parent-child relationship or a teacher-student relationship. It was just two people sitting at a coffee shop talking about books. And he moved to South Carolina, around the location roughly of where this book is set and where one of my favorite episodes is set. And for years, I would go down and visit him and stay at his house. It would be him and his wife and their dogs. His wife was nice as could be, but um, maybe not quite understood why I was there. I visited it at least once a year. Bob would always say, "You can come down, but I'm not going to entertain you." And of course, I would go down there, and we would go to coffee shops, and we would have lunch and um, talk endlessly. I remember we had a farewell get together before he moved down to South Carolina, and we were at this restaurant. It was Tony and Denise, friends of mine, all of our friends, and Bob and myself. And Bob ordered a glass of rye. So they put a glass down, and I'm 21 at this point, or 22 or something, but uh, legal drinking age, and I had never heard of rye at the time. And he goes, "Well, take a sip." And I take a sip, and we pass it around. Everyone has a sip of this rye. He goes, "Wow, rye. It's rye whiskey." And so we start ordering around the table, where we're all going to have a glass of rye. And I can't remember if it was me or somebody else, but someone takes a sip and goes, "It's not quite right." And we start passing that glass around and going, "It doesn't taste the same." And the waitress comes over, and we say, like, "We don't think these taste the same." And she goes, um, "Well, I really didn't know what you were asking for, so I just asked the bartender to kind of give you something." And so we all weren't sure of what exactly we were drinking at all. And uh, I remember Bob goes, this is the night before he's leaving, or days before he's leaving, and he goes, "I'm never gonna come to this place again." And Tony and Denise would go down and visit, and I would go down and visit, and um, uh, I'd bring a bottle of rye whiskey, and I suppose Tony would bring a bottle, and Denise would bring a bottle. We just had this tradition of rye whiskey bottles, and I was there one year, and we're looking at his liquor cabinet, and it has all these bottles of different kinds of rye whiskey, because it was I didn't tell the story very well, but it was this really funny story about an incident with rye whiskey. And I'm there, it's years later, and Bob just goes, like, "I don't even like rye." It's just a story that all of a sudden he's the person that gets bottles of rye whiskey. And he died. He died the day before Easter. Um, I didn't know his wife very well. Um, I didn't have a house number or her cell phone number. I only had contact through Bob. I saw a social media um, notice that he had died. This is years ago now, maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago, and um, I don't know who went to the. I didn't get to go to the funeral. I didn't get to hear uh, eulogies from good friend of his, good friends of his, or family members, or his son. People that I've heard about from Bob. I didn't get to offer condolences in any personal way, and it's just the memories that I have that are tremendously happy, informing. Uh, they informed a large part of my life. I owe a lot to my interest in reading and my reading habits from my good old friend Bob. And it's sweet and sad because he's gone. So, A Christmas Memory by Truman Capote, The Pickle Story by from the Andy Griffith Show, one of my own memories of my good old friend Bob, and it's fruitcake weather. So, thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you would like, and take care. Thank you. Bye.